Hi everyone, I hope you are all doing good at your homes. I want to say I miss you all very much. I haven't read any Small Spaces since I last saw you, but I've been dying to know what happens. So I'm going to continue where we left off last Friday. So when we left off, Ollie had looked down at her watch and it said river, so Coco and Brian and herself were heading to the river to see if they could get to the farm. So we are now on chapter 16. They didn't see any other people at all, and they were thirsty by noon, but they had to make the water bottle last. All kinds of hazards lay under the leaves, mud and puddles and roots to trip you. They had to pick their way along, skidding on the wet leaves. Ollie wished she had her hiking boots. Rain boots were not the best. But Coco was worse off. She was wearing canvas shoes and cotton socks and wasn't used to the cold, not like Ollie and Brian. An hour in, Ollie saw that Coco's lips were becoming an unpleasant sort of pale color. Ollie took off her rainbow hat and jammed it onto Coco's head. Coco opened her mouth, tripped, caught herself, and said, "Thanks, Olivia." Ollie said, "You're welcome, but seriously, call me Ollie." On they walked. The sky did not change. The trees did not change. Ollie would have wondered if they were going in circles, except that she and Brian were taking turns to blaze trees they'd passed with a gold marker from Coco's backpack. A few times Ollie thought she heard a rustle in the leaves like a bird or a squirrel. When she looked, nothing was there. But it gave her a creepy feeling, like something was slipping quietly along behind them. They sipped water and ate a handful of Coco's trail mix, chewing slowly to make it last. Brian stayed in front and Ollie stayed in back. They did it on purpose, keeping Coco in the middle. They didn't trust her to not get lost. "Guys!" Brian yelled from ahead of them. "I think I see something." Both girls hurried to catch up. Coco, Ollie, thought critically, looked like she was tripping only every 10 steps now. An improvement. The trees ended. They found themselves on the edge of a clearing. In the middle of the clearing was a tidy white house. Ollie stared like it was a mirage. Of all the things she was expecting in this creepy forest, a cozy cabin was not one of them. Ollie smelled wood smoke and laundry and something spicy. Coco's eyes were shining. "It's okay, we're not lost anymore. We can call my dad from here. Hello!" Coco yelled. Someone waved in answer. A lady stood in the yard hanging laundry. She wore a baggy old dress, her hair a friendly brown braid down her back. Coco and Brian ran forward. Ollie followed, frowning. There was something weird about the scene, but she didn't quite know what it was. The woman caught sight of them. "Look at this," she cried, smiling. "3 of them, as I live and breathe, at lunchtime too. Are you hungry?" "Yes, thank you," cried Coco. Ollie still hung back. She was thinking of Hansel and Gretel and the witch's gingerbread cottage, but the lady seemed nice, ordinary, and she was a person, not a scarecrow. Her eyes weren't white, but reassuringly blue. "Come in, my ducks," she said. "You look cold." Coco was already at the gate of the cottage garden. Ollie still hesitated. Brian looked back. "Ollie," he said, "what is it?" Ollie didn't know. She just knew that something was weird. She looked down at her watch. 3 hours, 10 minutes, 49 seconds, said the countdown. And now there was a word. Food, crossed out. Food, but crossed out. What did that mean? No food? Now Ollie wondered if she should have explained about her watch so she could ask the others what they thought. It was true they didn't have that much food, and if the lady was offering... The lady was bustling Coco through the door. "What do you think, Ollie?" Brian asked. Ollie was still frowning, trying to say what was bothering her. She's hanging her laundry," Ollie replied slowly. on a day like this, she gestured toward the damp forest. It will never dry, Ollie thought some more, looking around. And she lives here? There's no road. And there wasn't. Just a thin track through the forest. Who lived in a place with no road? No generator, said Brian, realizing. No power lines, even. Okay, that is weird. Does your phone work here? Brian had already pulled out his. No Wi-Fi either. Brian and Ollie looked at each other. It's like it's not a real house at all, said Brian. What real house has no road and no electricity? Are we still in the bad Narnia? How do we tell? I don't know, Ollie said. Well, it might be okay, said Brian. Even if it's not, one lady can't be a match for the three of us, can she? Maybe she'll have some answers. Ollie looked down at her watch again. Food crossed out, said the digital display. Well, it might be all right, said Ollie, but we should be really careful. Cautiously, they crossed the cottage garden and stepped into the lady's neat white house. It was bright and tidy and cheerful and warm. A wood stove sat next to a wood rack in the corner. Ollie, despite herself, sighed in relief when the hot air from the stove touched her chilled face. The house was old-fashioned. A big old cuckoo clock ticked away to itself. The stove gave off a soft golden firelight, and there was an oil lamp lit on the table like the pewter one her dad had and lit for special occasions. The woman had opened her oven, was peering into its depths. Ollie had a glimpse of a rich brown cake puffing up in its pan. It smelled fantastic. Nearly done, said the woman. She banged the oven door shut and rubbed her back. What brings you to these parts? She asked. She had a full kettle on the stove and went to a cupboard and got out what looked like tea leaves pressed into a square. She began crumbling the tea into 6 cups. Why 6 cups? Ollie wondered. Who are the other 2 for? Are you taken on to work at the farm for the summer? The woman asked. She frowned at the kids' backpacks and jackets at Ollie's rain boots. You're dressed strangely for it. No, Coco said in her best impress adult's voice. We only went to the farm for the day. We have to go to school usually. But if you don't mind, we're looking for... The woman turned around suddenly, hands on her hips, and shook a teaspoon at Coco. Well, look who's high and mighty now, she said. No work just because you have to go to school? Well, I'll have you know, both my boys work and go to school, and they are the better for it. Her face turned red. Sorry, said Coco. She was wearing her most angelic face, the kind that made adults pat their head. We didn't mean to offend you. Do you have a phone? I want to call my mom. Instantly, the woman's face softened. No, pretty child. I'm sure you meant no disrespect. And I do sometimes get it muddled. Summer and winter, winter and summer. Funny how the seasons run together. I depend on my boys to tell me the day. They're due back soon. If we all sit down together and eat gingerbread, they'll be back before we know it. Coco and Ollie and Brian looked at each other. After a moment, Coco and Brian sat down wearily, but Ollie stayed standing. Yes, the old woman went on. They will be home soon, very soon. She bustled with the tea and gingerbread. She whispered to herself as she worked. Mother's waiting, she's waiting. The lady opened the oven and took out the gingerbread. Sometimes it seems like I do more waiting than not these days. The gingerbread came plunk down on the middle of the table. The woman cut 6 generous slices and heaped each plate high. She smiled at her visitors. There, dears, she said, isn't this nice? Oh, yes, Coco said, very nice. I'm Coco Zintner. This is Brian Battersby and Olivia Adler. Thank you so much for the food. What's your name? Well, I'm Mrs. Webster, said the lady cheerfully, though everyone calls me Kathy. Brian's glance flew to Ollie's. Coco, intent on being angelic, hadn't really registered the name. Do you know anything about the scarecrows? Brian asked the woman. Kathy was putting more logs on the fire. Scarecrows, she said vaguely. What? Out in the corn? Kathy Webster is dead, Ollie thought. Her bones are in the graveyard. They're so festive in the fall with pumpkins, Kathy went on. Ollie broke in sharply. Your sons, when are they coming? Soon, said Kathy, and smiled. I'm keeping the stove hot for them. They will have baths by the fire and good hot tea. Both Brian and Coco had picked up their steaming gingerbread as they listened. What are their names? Whispered Ollie. The old lady looked surprised. Why, Jonathan, she said. And Caleb, of course. A rap came sharp on the window. Ollie spun, and each window was a face. 2 smiling scarecrows' faces. Scarecrows dressed in old-fashioned black suits. Ollie screamed short and sharp just as Brian and Coco gagged together. It was not gingerbread they'd bitten into. It was some foul thing, moldy and dry. They each spat out a mouthful of rotten dust. They were on their feet, hemmed in, and then a bony hand wrapped around Ollie's wrist. Ollie screamed again. The woman didn't look alive anymore. Her face was shriveled, her mouth fallen in. Tell them to come in, Kathy whispered. Please, tell them to come in. They come to the door and I can hear them crying in the night, but they never come in. Tell them I've been waiting in this place. How long? I don't remember anymore. Long and long and long and... The fire was out in the oven. The shutter rattled. The china was all covered with dust. It was icy cold. Ollie wrenched free. We have to go, she cried. There are scarecrows right outside, snapped Brian. We have to risk it, said Ollie. The bus driver said they're only dangerous at night, remember? The bus driver who brought us here? Demanded Coco. The woman had hurried to the window. My boys, my dear ones, please. She was fumbling at the window, and beyond her were the blank, smiling faces of the scarecrows. Come on, said Ollie. The 3 of them ran, tripping over the threshold. 2 scarecrows stood outside, 1 at each window. Somehow, they were not looking into the house anymore, but were watching the kids run, still smiling their wide smiles. The laundry was rotting on the line, the shutter banging and banging and banging. Ollie, Coco, and Brian dashed into the woods, dodging trees, wild with panic. Sure, the scarecrows were marching behind them in a steady pursuit, while their dead mother wailed in her cold house. All right, chapter 17 will be coming to you soon. Have a good night.